Everyone, welcome to Manufacturing Hub. It is Wednesday. Vlad and I are back here again. We have Kent on. We're super excited to have Kent on. We will go introduce him in just a moment. If you guys have been here before, welcome back. If you're new here, welcome. If you're new here, Vlad and I, just about every Wednesday afternoon, jump on and have a conversation with another practitioner, another person in industry. Every month we pick a theme, and this month we're talking all about career advice, careers, very much going and telling some of those fun stories that, as Vlad and I realized, we've never had the opportunity to tell ourselves, and we get to go have those conversations with some of our guests. Having said that, if you guys have questions, you want to let us know where we're at, please feel free to go ahead and hit them in the comments. If you're watching live, the two major platforms that you guys are seeing us on are LinkedIn and YouTube. We're also on a bunch of other platforms, or maybe you guys are listening to this in podcast form. Having said that, if you guys have questions, please feel free to go ahead and drop them in the comments. As we go through, we will do our very best to go get to those questions. And if we don't get to those questions, we will do our very best to go get to them after the show. But without further ado, everyone, officially welcome to Manufacturing Hub episode 189. Vlad, we are getting dangerously close to episode 200, and I will let everyone know that we have put zero thought into what episode 200 is going to be, other than my thinking we need to do something special for episode 200, which will be a 2025 problem for all of us. We want to welcome our guest to the show, Kent Melville, Director of Sales Engineering for Inductive Automation. Kent, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. Thank you so much for taking the time. I think the conversation is going to be really interesting because, again, you have a career that is not a pure technically centered career. So I think we have a lot of questions prepared for you, and I'm looking forward to it. That being said, before we get into that, could you give us a bit of a background of yourself? How did you get into, how did you get started in your career? How did you get into inductive automation? What was the progress like, and ultimately what you're doing today?
Yeah, I'm happy to get into that. My path has zigged and zagged as I've found my way to the industrial automation space. I guess I'll start out, as I went to college, I started out I was in an engineering program. It was like a pre-engineering program to figure out which discipline within engineering you wanted to do. But I didn't actually declare my major as an engineering major because I was taking a bunch of music classes. And so I was technically a music major because they wouldn't let me take the music classes I wanted to take unless I was a declared music major. But I was actually not wanting to major in music. I wanted to major in engineering. So I do that, and I'm trying to figure out engineering. I end up going off and doing a mission for my church for 2 years, coming back, ended up missing my older brother of all things. And so I went to a small liberal arts school called Southern Virginia University, and they didn't have an engineering program. And so I was like, what do I do for school? They had a computer science program. And I was like, oh, it's close enough. And so I went into computer science, ended up graduating in computer science, got my minor in music there. And it's interesting because at a liberal arts school, they're not accredited to give bachelor's of sciences degrees. And so I actually have a bachelor of arts in computer science. So on my resume, you'll see BA of computer science. That's not a typo, that's real. It's throughout school, I did internships and did jobs. I mainly worked for a small marketing and design firm as a web developer. And so I would do classes, party with my friends at night, and then in the middle of the night, I'd make websites for every business in town, essentially. And I just didn't sleep, and that was my life. But I also went and I did work at Intel for a little bit. I'm from California, and Intel's big here, and so worked for Intel for a while, working on algorithms for zooming in electron microscopes to debug chipsets, and that was pretty cool. I worked for backcountry.com, working on their backend for their e-commerce stuff. But once I graduated, I actually ended up at a company called Hypergen, and we were essentially an integrator, but not in the industrial automation space. We were in the ERP space. So it was 20 to 30 people in that company, and we were all about deploying PeopleSoft, which is an ERP product that's now owned by Oracle. But we would go and deploy that for a bunch of big companies, right, and help them implement it, help them customize it, and it really set me up for a transition into the industrial automation space, because my first week at that company, they gave me a 1,000-page manual that was how to install 8.53 or something of PeopleSoft. And they said, by the end of the week, you have to have it installed. And that's your onboarding program. And so I learned how to read technical documentation. I learned about how tightly coupled databases and software can be, and how easy it is to mess things up and have to restart and all that kind of stuff. But that was out in Virginia. I worked there for a while, and then I missed home. I missed California. Came back, and I thought I was going to do PeopleSoft for the rest of my career. So I was interviewing with Verizon, who used, I don't know if they still use it, but at the time they used PeopleSoft extensively, and also was interviewing at Oracle because they owned PeopleSoft. And I'm like, yeah, I'll go do this, and that'll be fun. And I was on my third interview with both of them, and was just thinking I was just going to pick which one I wanted. I went to a random career fair because my brother was also looking for a job. And I'm like, yeah, I'll just go with him. Found a little booth for a company called Inductive Automation. I talked to them, and I was like, oh, this isn't interesting to me. And I moved on. But my wife also came with me. Shout out to my wife for saving my career. She went and talked with that booth, and she's like, oh, this is really interesting. This is a cool company. And she grabbed an application, and she came and said, you have to apply to this company. And I was like, okay, she saw something I didn't see, right? And so I ended up filling out the application. I was on a Saturday. I went to this career fair. They reached out. I submitted it Monday. They reached out to me Monday. I did a phone interview on Wednesday. Came in for an in-person interview on Friday. They offered me the job on the spot, and I started on Monday. And I had been interviewing with Verizon and Oracle for multiple months at this point, right? It had been taking forever. And yeah, I was like, maybe I do want to work for a company that's agile, that's, small enough that they can make decisions quickly, and that wanted me, And so found myself at Inductive Automation, and now it's been almost 9 years. I joined as a sales engineering analyst, and that was a role that just was like, hey, go learn the software, go learn the industry, go do all this stuff. And then I became a sales engineer. At that time, there were only 3 of us. There was Travis Cox, Kevin McCluskey. They were the co-directors of sales engineering. And then there was me, the sales engineer. And that was our entire division. And so then I grew. We hired more people. I became the sales engineering manager. And then we added more teams. And slowly but surely, I became the director. And now Travis and Kevin both have C-suite jobs, and they've left full reins to me, for better or for worse. But we've got about 30 people in the division, and so it's been fun to see not just the growth of my team, and also being able to play a big role in growing that team, but also to see Inductive Automation go from about 70 employees to about 350 employees, right? So a lot of growth, a lot of change over those 9 years. So really excited to be here with you guys talking about career paths, because there's a lot to unpack there, right? There's a lot of things that I've been able to see with different types of companies, different industries, and then even within the same company, a lot can change, and your career can take different twists and turns. It's all very exciting. So yeah, that's my long-winded answer to your question of a little bit about me.
That is awesome, right? And look, I have, I guess, like several questions on that side, but I will make maybe 2 comments, right? So I think on your side, it is awesome. Well, first of all, to take the initiative to go in person, I think is extremely valuable. A lot of people, I feel, underestimate the in-person connection versus, right now you have more tools, I guess, than when you were applying, even to just hit, apply through LinkedIn or apply through Indeed, and you just kind of send out, hopefully not an AI generated resume, but you're missing that like connection in person. So I think that's extremely valuable for anyone's listening to still be doing. Number 2, on their side, right? You mentioned this a little bit, but they moved really quickly, right? They understood who they were talking to. They understood, where you could fit into the organization. And I feel that many, I guess, companies, again, maybe they have some leeway because they're big and there's a lot of bureaucracy, but ultimately, when you put your candidate through 3 to 5 rounds of interviews, it becomes difficult to retain people who are good, right? Because someone who's going to be a good candidate is going to have options. But Kent, I do want to ask you, like looking back, right? Besides I guess the speed of getting that, I guess, job through Inductive, what were maybe some interesting selling points, right? You said that the company was really interesting. What were your thoughts and what like actually sold it? Was it the people? Was it the tools? Was it, maybe the job itself? Like, what was your impression at that time, if you're able to paint us maybe that picture?
Yeah. So one thing that benefited me at this point is I had done so many jobs and internships leading up to this point. In fact, I just realized I forgot to mention one. I worked for the California state government in the Secretary of State's office as a Unix administrator. They called it a Unix administrator. It was Linux. We weren't running true Unix on it, but I had worked for Intel. I had worked for the California state government, these really big entities, right? Where I was just, just a number, doing stuff. And it was hard to see how the work I did directly impacted the direction of the company and impacted our customers, right? And then I worked for this little marketing design agency. I had worked for, this company called Hypergen. There's 20 to 30 people. And at those companies, I felt like I had to, money was king. Everything was about, we have no budget, find a way to get around anything, it's, do the most with the least. And I felt like at some of those small companies, I couldn't do my best work because I didn't have the resources available to me to do it. At big companies, I had resources available to me, but I didn't have there was the red tape. There's the bureaucracy that I went and I didn't like what they were doing with their Linux systems. And I went to my boss and I proposed all this stuff. And he's like, those are all good ideas. We could get to that maybe in 2 years. And I was like, that's not going to work for me. I need to be moving forward. I need to be driving. And so when I found Inductive Automation at about 70 people, what impressed me was it felt small and intimate, but also they had enough money and cash flow that they weren't looking to cut corners. They were looking to do things right, and they're willing to invest in doing things right. And that was maybe the biggest thing that impacted me to this company. There was also things where they're like, yeah, we have company sports teams that people get together and play, and we have it was an office we were the penthouse suite essentially in this business place, and lots of places to go eat around it. So the location mattered to me. But in addition to all that, I guess the last thing I would say is just I went looking online about what people say about inductive automation, and there was so much positive stuff in the community, right? Of people who were like, yeah, we love this company, we love this product. And that matters to me too, because I wanted to see the impact of what I was doing. A medium-sized company allowed me to see that impact, but I also wanted to know that the impact of the company meant something, right? And inductive automation fit that bill for me. So yeah, lots of reasons, but those are a few of them.
Let me ask you, I guess, the second question around the transition into maybe more of a sales role, right? So I guess, was that intentional? Were you looking for something, I guess, a little bit different than pure implementation, which again, I don't know how much of that versus being very customer facing in some of those ERP consultancies you were. So was that intentional? Was the conversation with Travis and whoever else working on hiring you kind of also leaning towards a sales role, or were you also considering a technical role because ultimately you had the background? So I'm curious, maybe how did those maybe decisions and conversations took place at that time?
Yeah. Throughout my life, I was a math and science guy. I like math and science. And so everybody was always like engineering or mathematics or whatever, right? And but I also knew that I liked people. I like working with people. I like talking to people. And so what I thought my career path was going to be is I was going to go get a technical degree, and I was going to go work for a while, and then I was going to go back and get my MBA, and then try to go into management at a tech company. So I could be around tech that I love, and work with technical people, because I find technical people much more interesting at times. So those are the people I'm drawn to go talk to. Sorry to everybody out there who's not technical. I'm not that technical anymore, so I'm with you. But I love just nerding out with people, right? And as such, I went and I was in very technical positions before, where I was doing implementations, and I was not that customer facing. I was more just, doing stuff. But the one job, the job that I had building websites in college, that was this weird thing where the company was like 9 people, and I was a student, but I also was the most technical person there. And so I would go and I would meet with business owners and talk to them about their business and how they wanted to represent their business online and what their needs were. And then I would go build them their website. And when I found that role at a sales engineer, I realized that role of talking to customers, understanding what their business model is, how they make money, what drives them, and then understanding their problems, and then getting to figure out what the solutions to those problems are. That's the fun part of engineering to me. That's people, that's problems, that's technical know-how, that's architectures, that's all this stuff. But then did I need to be the person who actually went and implemented those solutions? No, that didn't give me the same kind of satisfaction, right? Like I do enjoy getting a job done and like seeing it in action, but I found that for me personally, I got the same kind of satisfaction for drawing the blueprint and then other people actually making it a reality. And so sales engineering has been kind of ideal for me. It was an easy transition because I still have to be technical. I still talk to people about technical stuff all day. So I'm talking to the people I want to talk to. But what's especially cool about it, I guess, is that instead of hyperfixating on one problem for months, I have 5 meetings in a day, all of them talking to different customers about different problems, and I get to give them my view of a solution for 5 different problems, all in a single day, right? And so it's more problems, more troubleshooting, more brainstorming, more engineering in some aspect of that, right? Of figuring out technical solutions to problems. It's just less implementation, and I found that was a sweet spot for me. I've got a lot of people that I manage now that would hate that. They're like, don't keep rotating problems out on me. Like, let me sink my teeth into something and like, let me really wrap my head around it and solve this problem, right? And I think that that's going to be great for a lot of people. And I think you need all kinds, right? And technical companies need all kinds. But yeah, I found that the transition for me was pretty easy because I had already been planning on going the management route, so I could be talking to people, but I thought I'd be talking internally with people within my own company. Sales engineering was just like, you're still going to talk to people about technical stuff, but it's not internal, it's external. You're helping customers.
I would say that makes a lot of sense for many reasons, but that is a tangent maybe we'll explore at a different time. Dave, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree, Kent. I think it's really interesting. I did not know at least half of those things that you just said about your background, and I think that's really interesting, especially coming into a company that's 70 people. I would agree. I have seen and worked with large corporations who, for red tape and political and other reasons, it's yes, this is a great idea, and it's going to take 2 years to get there. And I've worked with smaller groups that yes, this is a great idea, but can you do it for $0? Or can we buy you a pizza at the end of the week or take you out for lunch and say thank you for doing this, I don't know, $300,000 thing over the course of your free time, which is two sides of a difficult coin, if you will. Can you tell us a little bit more about your transition from a sales engineering analyst, being one of 3 people in the sales engineering group, to now being the director of sales engineering? What did that progression look like? What sort of skills did you learn? Do you have any interesting stories? What did the group look like when you started adding other people? Would really like to dig into that a little bit, please.
Sure. Even though the company was 70 people, and I say we had, we were ready to invest in doing things the right way, it doesn't mean that there was a lot of free time to be had, right? And so as I joined as a sales engineer, or as a sales engineering analyst, my two direct supervisors, the only other people in my division, were Travis and Kevin, who were both very important in the company and were extremely busy. And so I think one of the things that they were really looking for when they hired me was somebody who could be independent, that they didn't have to handhold everything. They didn't have to spoon feed me information, right? They wanted somebody who could be pointed in a direction and they could just run with it, right? And so that's what I did as a sales engineering analyst. Does that mean that I only learned by reading? No, I found that we all worked within one office at the time, and I would just go walk, and my best friends were support. We have a great support division, and I would go and I would stand in front of support, and we were in cubicles. I'd look down this hallway and I'd see all the support reps, on either side of the aisle, and I would say, who's not currently on the phone with the customer? And I would go and I would just start asking them all my technical questions about the software, about the product, about the industry, because they're the boots on the ground. They know what's going on, right? It's fun because those people that I used to go talk to, most of them are now in other places in the company. They manage our website. They are in our development team. They, do other stuff. Support was really, and continues to be, Inductive Automation really likes to bring entry-level people into support and let them grow from there, because support is where you learn how our software works, what customers need, all that kind of stuff. And some people think like, if I get a technical degree, I don't want to go get a support job because what am I going to do with that? I'll be stuck in, customer service my whole life. That isn't the case, at least in Inductive Automation. Starting in support is a great way to get into dev and to other, technical paths. But I would talk to them constantly. I was just going and bugging them, and everybody would sigh when they saw me show up. I was persistent, but I learned, right? And then the other thing that they had me start doing was we would get RFPs from customers, requests for proposals, where they want Inductive Automation to say, like, here's our big project and all of our requirements. Tell us how your software can do it. And they are long, and they are deep and intense. And Travis and Kevin had been doing them in the past, and it was just such a time sink for them. And they're like, all right, Kent, here you go. Figure out answers to all these questions. Start responding to all of our RFPs. And that was a crash course, let me tell you, of just trying to figure out, how to respond. But I found that it was just the written form of what I wanted to do anyway, right? I wanted to talk to customers about their requirements and then help come up with technical answers. And I think I enjoy it more when it's a discussion, but I found that I could get some joy out of it doing it on paper too, right? And so started doing that. And then once I had the background, once I had the knowledge to really be useful, then I just started shadowing. I just attended every meeting that Travis or Kevin had with customers. I was just there on the call listening. And then I started like writing scripts for how, if I was going to talk about certain topics, how I would do it. And I would practice those scripts over and over. Like, oh, somebody wants to know how to build a recipe management system using Ignition, and you need to be able to show how to do it live in 5 to 10 minutes. All right, you got to really nail it down, right? Of like all the things you're going to click on, the tags you're going to use, the database queries you're going to run, all that kind of stuff. And so I drilled, right? Eventually they started letting me take lead on meetings, but Travis and Kevin would still attend. So they would be in the background, ready to save me or fix any, inadvertent lies I told. But they would let me run with it, right? And eventually it got to the point where they didn't have to chime in anymore. I was doing all right, and so then I became an official sales engineer, and I was off to the races. And so I think it's interesting now that I've managed people. You have different kinds of people. You've got people who say, tell me what my job ladder is, my job path is, and like when the company is going to unlock the next gates for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very reactive of like the company should dictate my career, and they should give me the training I need, and they should provide everything, and then I'll jump through those hoops. And there are some companies that do that really well, and that's great, and that works for some people. That hasn't ever been my experience at any of the companies I've worked for. Usually, you've got to fight for what you want, and you've got to work really hard, right? And you've got to prove yourself. And I feel like that's what I did when I joined Inductive Automation. Is I just like they gave me very loose direction, and rather than me asking a million questions of like, okay, but what do you mean? Like, what is this? What do I do with this? Of my direct supervisors, instead, I just carved my own path, right? And ended up setting up the expectations for me to move to sales engineering, but also we then started hiring more sales engineers. The documentation that I wrote as I was just trying to figure everything out ended up becoming training materials for the new sales engineers. And then even before they made me the sales engineering manager of the new sales engineers, I was talking to them and they said they already saw me as their manager because I had been providing them all these tools and these resources, right? So then it was a really natural step into becoming a sales engineering manager. And I've got more to say about them going from a manager of one to a manager of multiple teams than director, but let me pause there. Did that all make sense? Is there any questions about that?
No, I think that was good. Let me ask one more question, Kent, because for all of our podcast listeners, Vlad has that look on his face where he can just ask Kent 45 minutes of straight questions without me being able to ask another one, which is always a good thing. But no, to you, Kent, I guess you described a really interesting path, and it's a path that I have also found at various points in my career. Is you come in and the role is loosely defined as we want you to do this, but there's no training material and you have to go kind of figure out everything on your own. And some of that is, kindly hounding support and or sitting in on meetings and or kind of figuring it out on your own. And that may also include just sitting there and kind of scratching your head at the end of the day of what did I do for 10 hours? I don't really know, but hopefully 6 months from now, I know the thing. That works for some people. There are other people in the world that is a living hell, right? Like that is the worst situation that they could possibly fall into. So talking about either your time as a manager or you now managing multiple teams and being the director, how do you go help people with their career paths, maybe in a bit more structured, functional way for people who aren't just throw me into a problem and I will go figure it out?
Yeah. Just because I went through it, I don't believe everybody should have to go through it, right? And I think that we have some responsibility as people who go through and pave the way to leave things better for the next people that follow us, right? And that's kind of what I was talking about, where I took the documentation and the stuff that I had recorded, and I used that to onboard the next people in a much better way. And I think that there's different styles of management, but I think that a big thing is setting expectations with people. And Travis and Kevin, I'm not trying to say that they were bad managers for me, that they didn't give me any information, because something they did really well is they set expectations of what success was, of what they wanted. They didn't give me a direct path of how to get there, but they told me what the end goal is, right? And so then I took that as a manager and said, all right, I want to make sure that I am setting expectations with people of what I want from them, what success looks like to me. And ideally, I'm giving them more direction than I got, right? I'm giving them a path to get there. But I think it's a good thing to get used to in your career as either a manager or as an employee, or anywhere in between, right? There's all different kinds of tiers of management, but is learning to set expectations and being willing to leave wiggle room, if that makes sense. As a manager, I don't think you should over dictate. I think you should give people a goal and you should give them ideas of maybe how you would approach it, but give them the wiggle room to find their own path, right? And so it's this tricky balance where I'm like, I'm not saying that what I did was right. I'm also not saying it was entirely wrong. I think you have to find the happy medium, the hybrid of where you say you give people enough structure to succeed, but you give them enough wiggle room to grow. And if people aren't growing, you're not building something. And that's been part of why I've really enjoyed inductive automation, going from 70 people to 350 people, is because I've had the luxury of every time I hire somebody, I'm not thinking I'm hiring you into this one role and that's all I ever want from you is to do one role and do that one thing, right? I want to hire you to fill that role, and then we're going to figure out what your next role is, right? And it may be that it's just you're going from a sales engineer 1 to a sales engineer 2 to a sales engineer 3, but it also may be that we're creating new positions for you as you prove your ability to accomplish goals as I give you goals, right? And something that I learned as a manager really quick is at first I was hiring people to delegate to them to do the things that I was doing before. Because I had been doing it all. There was only 3 people in the division. I did everything, and then we needed to do more of that one thing, so we hired people to do that thing just more, right? And then I found out as I hired people, they had skills that I didn't have, and they could do things better than me, or they could do different things than me, but I still had to manage them. And so now I couldn't just say, this is exactly how to do it, and just do that one thing, right? It's now, once again, I can give them a goal, but I give them the wiggle room of how to get there, and they may do it in a way that's better than anything I would have done, right? And so, yeah, how do people grow? How do they get into their positions? I think it's a give and take. You've got to be willing to take some risks to push yourself a little bit, but also management has to set clear expectations. Yeah, I think for it to all work, you just got to communicate, right? And that's where it breaks down. If you're not communicating with managers, or managers aren't communicating with you, expectations aren't being set, people aren't communicating, and you're going to get stuck in a role for a really long time. If you want to keep growing, there's got to be that open communication.
Kent, let me ask you maybe a more fundamental question around sales and sales engineering, right? Because I ultimately don't want to assume that all of our listeners maybe understand what those roles truly entail. And you've mentioned RFPs, which means you have leads that are already interested in the product, right? But I think that the vision that many people may seem from the outside, that sales is purely, you pick up the phone, you call insert manufacturer there with some kind of an MES or SCADA solution, again with a specific name, and you'll tell them, well, like, hey, we have ignition that is better for a reason XYZ. You get hung up on 999 times out of 1,000, and then you sell one license to that one manufacturer. So maybe could you paint us a picture of what a sales role, I would say maybe earlier career, kind of does in that specific scenario? Is it working with existing customers? Is it going on site? Is it going to trade shows? Is it figuring out maybe even some marketing materials that you can do together as a sales and marketing initiative? So what does that maybe look like in terms of time spent in those roles?
Yeah, I'll speak to inductive automation, and then also maybe mention how I also see it in other places within the industry. But at inductive automation, a sales team existed. It predates sales engineering, right? We had a sales team from the very beginning, right? We were an integrator, and we created a software, and then we decided, we want to go in we want to share the software with other integrators, and start selling it to end users directly. We hired salespeople, right, to go and talk to customers. And then at that time, there was some boots on the ground of going and visiting and talking to people. But it was a lot of calls, a lot of cold calls, just talking to people. And we did send our salespeople to conferences as well. There's a lot of industry conferences, and that can be more effective than cold calling, right? To go and say, all right, we know all of our target demographic is going to be at this conference. We're going to invest some money to get a booth, and then instead of going out to them, we're going to let them come to us, right? And so trade shows were a big part of our sales team. But as we grew our sales team, it's hard to hire salespeople that really know how to talk to engineers and that can meaningfully answer software questions and architecture questions and all these things, right? Security questions, all that kind of stuff. And so early in the life of inductive automation, they would just pull in people from support to join sales calls, or they pull in somebody from dev to, get on the call with people. And eventually we realized we really need some people dedicated that are technical people that are just there to support the sales team. They're there not to acquire new customers, but once we've gone and found new leads, then we get a sales engineer involved to talk to them, to help answer their questions, to demo the software, all that kind of stuff. And so we still have a sales team. Our sales team is still bigger than our sales engineering team. They're primarily responsible for finding customers, talking to customers, getting quotes to customers, and they provide basic demos of the software, and they act as the main point of contact for customers. If they have got questions, you come to your sales rep, and then they help figure out where to direct you within our company, right, to get you information. But sales engineers get brought in pretty early on because we want to make sure that as part of the sales process, it's not surface level. We want to make sure that we get deep, especially in manufacturing and industrial automation as a whole, right? I'm not buying software because it looks cool. I'm buying software because I've got specific needs, and I need to know that that software is going to meet those specific needs. And I'm not going to give you a dime until you prove to me that it really does solve this problem, right? And so from the beginning, we've also had like a free trial, and that's great. We're like, oh yeah, well, just download it and play with it before you give us money, and that's how you can see if it solves all your problems. But people are like, no, like I'm not going to go and spend forever learning your platform just to evaluate it. Like, show me, right? And that show me question is where sales engineering comes into play, where the salesperson can't really show them effectively, but a sales engineer can come in and really say, like, you got these specific problems. I've got this specific software that does this specific thing to solve those specific problems. Does that work for you? And if they say yes, then we're like, great. Now go talk to the salesperson about pricing and all that kind of stuff and figure that out. And so I don't think I would be happy in a traditional sales role personally, because I don't love let's negotiate pricing. Let's do all this, let's talk about that. I'm like, no, let's get to your technical problems and let me talk about how we can solve them and then hand it back to sales, right? But I do think that had I not been quite as technical as I am, maybe sales would have been a good path. That there are people that want to talk to technical people like I did, want to be in this world, but they don't want to have to learn to program. They don't like doing these things, right? Sales is a fun way to be in the industry without having to be real technical, right? Especially if you've got sales engineering backing you up. But sales engineering for me has been really, really rewarding. So that's kind of the difference between sales and sales engineering. When you're at a smaller company, especially integrators, those lines blur a lot, right? Where when you get a salesperson, they're also arranging conferences for you. They're arranging events for you. They are in Photoshop making your flyers. They're doing all kinds of stuff, right? They're running a podcast for you, right? They're doing all the different things. But yeah, at Inductive Automation, there's a pretty clear separation between sales engineering. I will just a couple other things. We do attend conferences. So sales engineering does travel to conferences now. Sales does not travel to conferences anymore for Inductive Automation. We send our sales engineers to go have those technical conversations with people at our booths.
Interesting. And regardless of the conference, like all conferences, it's like that?
We also have a PR team. That's our public relations team that manages our events. And so we send non-technical people, but they're from the PR team, not the sales team for us. But then we get leads from that, and then those leads go to the sales team, and the sales team is the ones that follow up and talk to these customers and stuff. But yes, we don't send our sales team to conferences anymore, other than our own. We have our own conference, ICC. You can talk to all of our sales reps there. Shout out to ICC 2025. Everybody should come attend. But yes, we're kind of unique in that we just send the engineers.
It's interesting, right? And again, obviously, the three of us maybe attend like different conferences as well. But it's always interesting to see what the booth presence looks like, whether that's like a pure salesperson or it's someone technical that you can actually ask kind of like in-depth questions. So I certainly appreciate that you guys are leaning towards the technical expertise, because again, I think your product is highly technical. It solves technical challenges first and foremost, right? And it's not, how would I say it? It's not just kind of like the pure UI UX. It really needs to drive manufacturing that is mission critical in many instances. Let me
Yeah.
ask you, like speaking of that and like different maybe personalities, right? Like at the current size, but also looking back, right? I want to paint like the two extremes, right? You have a person who's been maybe in sales in a completely different industry, who's got the I want to say the pizzazz to be able to, speak with the customers, and is very good at their craft, but not necessarily doesn't know the OT maybe challenges and the IT challenges related with SCADA, MES, and such tools. But on the other side, you have a very technical, maybe OT engineer that's implemented like SCADA, MES at an end user who's not very maybe person oriented. Who would you kind of like pick for your organization? And also, how do you maybe fill in those gaps, right? Because you've mentioned this before, that you've trained many people and you've created documentation on how to train them. But I know it's not, for Ignition, I can go and find a manual and I can do the courses. But on the sales side, I feel it's a lot more like, I guess, a gray area, right? You cannot really teach someone those people skills, and obviously they can be improved. But I'm curious, maybe what your thoughts are on maybe upskilling those kinds of individuals.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I'm going to jump back into my narrative a little bit here. So at this point in history, I was sales engineering manager. We had a sales engineering team. And then we found that we were hiring engineers. Some were better suited towards talking to customers, and some were less suited towards talking to customers, based on not capabilities necessarily, but based on personalities and whether they enjoyed it, right? Do you find joy in talking to people, or do you want to just build stuff, right? And at the time, sales engineers were not just meeting with customers, but we were also responsible for building our public demo project, which is still a thing. You can go to demo.inductiveautomation.com and you can see our public demo project. But and then eventually we started building Exchange resources, which are free resource online people can just download and play with. And those are all still sales things, because we think that in order for people to understand how Ignition is going to solve their problems, they have to see something. And instead of building one-off things for every customer to show them how it's going to solve their problem, if you can build some lowest common denominator stuff, right? That's a demo project, so you can show them once, show a bunch of people this thing that you built one time. That saves you a lot of effort, right? And so we were spending a lot of our sales engineers' time building these resources behind the scenes, and we decided to split our team. We said, we're going to keep the sales engineers focused on just getting on calls with customers. And then we're going to form a new team called application engineering. And application engineering is still within the sales engineering division, but it's people responsible for building these resources. And occasionally, we still pull application engineers onto calls with customers, but it's to talk about a resource they built or about a specific project they're trying to build, and they talk about how they would build it, right? It's all very purposeful in the types of conversations we bring an application engineer into. But a sales engineer, we throw them into anything, right? You're going to just go talk to a customer. They're going to bring out all kinds of questions. You're going to talk to them. It's you got to be ready just to talk about whatever, right? And so we found that there was a place for both within our division of sales engineering, but we needed the people skills to be able to, have a good cadence with our salespeople and to make customers feel good. At the end of the day, they still need to be excited about the software, right? And so we needed the personality of people to get people excited. But we found that wasn't the only relevant thing. We also needed all these tools, and we needed to hire people that could build these tools, right? And so now our application engineering team is actually bigger than our sales engineering team. It turns out there's a lot of stuff to build behind the scenes. It's also easier to hire into that position. It's hard to find people that are both technical and like talking to people. So for those of you who do both, you get paid a premium to do both. So I think that there's some advantages if you're willing to talk to people. Don't just give up on that, right? And say, well, I'll just build stuff. That's easier. I'd say, certainly at Inductive Automation, we pay a little extra for people who are willing to be customer facing. But yeah, how did I train people, was part of your question, to do that customer facing role? Because you're right, it's not oh, go read a book exactly. We did a lot of role playing where I would pretend to be the customer and I would say, all right, sell me this thing. And I said earlier, I had been writing scripts for things before this, of like I'd write a script to how I'm going to do show off what I say, recipe management systems, or building out a simple HMI, or setting up MQTT to publish data up to a broker or whatever, right? I have all these scripts. And so I started saying, all right, I want you to go write your scripts. That's the technical piece. You'll go figure that out. But then I need you to role play it to me where I'm asking you questions. I'm interrupting you. I'm taking you off of your script. We're doing things. And how do you handle that, right? And we did a lot of that. We did a lot of role playing. We still do a lot of role playing today in how we train people for our team, because you just got to get your reps in. It's not. Some people are just naturally gifted. Some people naturally talk to people and they can do stuff. But for most of us, you just got to practice and you just got to talk to people. And so role playing works for us. Some people think it's really cheesy. Some people have a hard time getting past that and getting into character and not, they don't want to take it seriously. But it's worked. It's worked for us. And then the shadowing also helps, right? Where you just watch how people respond in real time, see how customers talk about things, and so in addition to role plays, just watching people talk has been really useful for us too.
Let me ask less of a question, but more of a clarification before I pass it to Dave. So the applications development team is different from the core Ignition development team, correct? So they build smaller applications. Just could you maybe make that nuance clear for maybe the listeners?
Yeah, so Inductive Automation makes a software called Ignition, and Ignition is a application development platform, meaning that what does Ignition do out of the box? Nothing. It is a tool set, right? So we have our development team at Inductive Automation that goes and they build this platform. And it gives you the ability to connect to databases, to connect to different devices, to give you a design environment where you can drag and drop and create screens, and gives you custom scripting environments you can do stuff. It gives you the ability to configure alarms and all kinds of stuff, right? So, but there's no pre-configured screens to start. There's no devices connected to start. There's no database with pre-configured data, right? And so we have a dev team that builds the platform. And then we said, all right, but now we need to show people what you can do with the platform. And so now we have a separate dev team that I manage within sales engineering that is focused on building applications on top of that platform. So we don't build the platform. We don't build the modules that go into Ignition, right? We build applications on top of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Dave?
And it's funny because we dog fooded Inductive Automation, meaning that it's a cool platform you can build all kinds of stuff on. And so we've built a lot of other internal applications. And because sales engineering specialized in developing applications on top of Ignition, we now have another team within sales engineering called systems engineering, which is responsible for building our internal CRM, our finance stuff, you get a quote from us, that quote was built using Ignition. Our license manager, all kinds of stuff is all built in Ignition. And that's now this third team that we've added, right? So we had sales engineering that's talking to customers, application engineering that's building external facing Ignition stuff. And now we have this internal facing Ignition stuff development team. And they all—
Is that publicly shared? Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
And they all have to have an overlapping skill set. So it kind of works for me to manage all of them because they all need to know how to build stuff in Ignition, whether they're telling customers how to do it, they're building it themselves for customers, or they're building it internally, right? It's the same stuff.
Interesting. Could I download a copy of Ignition CRM and run it for my own purposes? Hey, you mentioned it, so maybe.
I know, right? But we have found that people have asked us for stuff like that. So another thing our team has built is when you come to Inductive Automation to meet with us or to attend a training class or something like that, you have to sign in at the front desk. You come and there's a tablet there, That's running ignition. And you come and you look yourself up based on your appointment, and it prints off a badge. That's us connecting to a little printer that's going to print that off, just like you may be printing labels in a manufacturing plant, right? We're doing the same protocols, talking to this little printer, printing name badges, right? And that one is available on the Exchange. You can download that if you want people signing into your offices using Ignition, go for it. And we have taken some stuff and we're trying to add it to the Exchange, but the full CRM has been built piecemeal over time. Software companies out there, pay off your technical debt. We're currently paying off our technical debt on the CRM application we've built over time. So I don't know that we would release it as is to customers. I don't know if we'd be proud of it. There's certainly a lot of it we'd be proud of, but we got to clean up a little bit before we make it public. Just being honest.
That is super interesting. Appreciate that.
Yeah, so Vlad and I didn't make it into the building this year at ICC, but you go in and it is a very slick. I think Steve Heckman, when they opened the building, said that he built all of at least the first generation of it himself for the grand opening of the building, and it is super impressive. It is super impressive.
Dave, to that point, in January, I believe we're going to be releasing. Nobody knows about this. You heard it here first. But we're releasing a new case study, but it's not a case study about one of our customers. This one is a case study on us, on how we use Ignition. And it talks about how we use it for our HVAC system in our building. It talks about how, which Steve is the one who worked on that, just like you're talking about. It also talks about the CRM. It talks about like our sales engineering team, when we need to build architectures for customers, we built our own architecture builder inside Ignition. There's a bunch of internal applications that we've built in Ignition. So it drops in January. Watch out for that, everybody. A new case study from Inductive Automation focused on how we use Ignition.
That is really interesting. I will be interested to see what that looks like. I know a couple of integrators who have built similar solutions, but as I tell all end users, after having gone through the process of building a whole bunch of things, some things you shouldn't build on Ignition. So sometimes the experience is, yes, we could go build this entire learning management and HR and CRM on top of Ignition, but you guys don't really want to go buy that technical debt and then own that technical debt, similar to what you were saying, Kent, especially with some of the major upgrades we've seen even in the last half dozen years, from 7.9 to 8.1 and now 8.3 coming out. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the fun stuff, the other stuff, the ICC. I think a lot of that is talking about the fun stuff within a career. But I think it's also kind of building loyalty within the customer base and building loyalty within integrators and internally. So I guess, Kent, for anyone who has somehow managed to be living under a rock and not seen the things that Vlad and I have put out, or not see the things that Inductive has put out for ICC and a bunch of these other events, can you give everyone a quick overview of what it is and maybe some of the fun things that you are involved in during these major events?
Yeah. So, it's funny because when you make software and people start downloading it, customers talk and they start to, want to know that they're not the only ones doing stuff. They want to feel like they're part of a community, and you can either ignore that or you can lean into it. And at Inductive Automation, we have definitely leaned into building an ecosystem of end users and integrators and partners and people who all have tried to solve problems using Ignition, right? And you can do that online, but even better, you can do that at a conference. And so we decided, even when we were just like 100 people, it was less. We had ICC before I joined Inductive Automation. So we were, a 60, 50 person company, and we're hosting a conference. And it's like, why are we hosting our own conference? Like, is anybody going to come? Do they care, right? But we hosted a conference that we called ICC, which is the Ignition Community Conference. Because from the very beginning, we said, we want this to be about the community, bringing people together so people can learn from each other and see how people are using Ignition. And they benefit, and then we benefit, because they come up with new ideas and they use Ignition more and more in new ways, right? And so it's mutually beneficial. But it's a labor of love in that it's a lot of work to put together a conference. And we actually decided at one point that instead of doing it every year, we were going to do it every other year. And the community gently reminded us, not so gently, that this is a community conference. It's not an inductive automation conference. And we're going to come whether or not you guys host a conference. And so we heard their feedback loud and clear, and we kept it going every year. And every year people expect us to do something more, make it bigger and better and crazier. And in 2018, we were going to be releasing Ignition 8.0. Mm-hmm. Part of that release, we were releasing a new visualization product, a new module for Ignition called Perspective. And instead of building, Java Swing-based HMI screens with, not fixed resolutions, but like you drag stuff where it goes and it's not responsive really, right? It can scale, linearly, but it's not dynamic. And in the world of the, web UI coming in hot and changing things, right? We said we need to be able to give people a more modern UI framework that could be used on mobile devices or desktops or overhead displays or whatever, right? And so Perspective was that. And we said, this is a big release for us. And we started brainstorming, how do we show people how cool this is? And we said, the software's not even out yet. 8.0 is not out yet. We're just talking about it. It's just in an alpha state. Wasn't even a public beta yet. We said, this is a great idea. What if we have Travis and Kevin, who are both staples in the company, right? I've mentioned them several times. They're my direct bosses. What if they did a competition head-to-head where they had to see in 1 hour, in one session of the conference, how cool of an application they could build. And then we would let the attendees vote to say which was the better application. And that way we'd show the rapid application development platform of Ignition and this new Perspective module so people would see how quick and easy it is to build stuff. And they said, all right, we can do that, but we'll be broadcasting their screens, but it's going to be a little hard to see what they're doing as they are in the design environment and all that kind of stuff. And so they said, let's find somebody that can stand on stage and narrate what is going on, somebody who's familiar with Ignition, and can do all this. And they said, Kent, how about you? Let's have you stand on stage for an hour and talk about what you see on screen. And I was just excited to be included. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'm happy to do that. I had mentioned before that I had studied music in college, and I ended up getting my music minor. I was very into music. And don't cancel me, everybody, but I decided, like, hey guys, can I sing a song on stage while you're going? Because this might get boring if we're just watching you develop for an hour. Like, I don't know that that's going to be really engaging. So I think I need to have some material to keep people engaged throughout. And they're like, well, what song are you going to sing? And I had decided to ask them this question, and we'll get to why you're going to cancel me in a minute. So stay tuned. Don't forget that point. But I decided to ask them, not in a one-on-one setting. It was in a group setting. We had actually had what we call a war room. So we had decided we need a new updated demo project built in Perspective. And so we had sales engineers and we had developers in this conference room, and we were building out this demo project. And every time we found something we couldn't do in Perspective yet, we were telling development, hey, you need to go add this feature because other customers are going to want this too. And so we're just building this demo project on the fly. And in that room, I'm like, hey, can I sing this song? And they're like, well, if you're going to sing it in front of hundreds of people, sing it for this group right now so we can see if it's any good. And I was like, okay. And I had rewritten the lyrics to R. Kelly. See, now you're going to cancel me. R. Kelly's song, the Ignition remix. Mm-hmm. I had done it about how Perspective was a remix to Ignition. That was before he got
before all the bad stuff.
before all the bad stuff. I was
Is there a
innocent.
recording of this, Kent? If someone were to go and look for, that first performance of yours, could they find it on the
It's
web?
out there. It is out
Okay.
there. I think it's on our website somewhere. If you go back and look at recaps from ICC and you go find the recap from 2018, I think you'll find it there.
We'll
But
have to add that in the show notes for those who are
yeah,
listening.
you're gonna have to find that. But yeah, I didn't have like a background track or anything. It was just me up there. I got the whole audience to snap, and then I just like rap sung this thing. But it's funny because when I did it that one time in that conference room, as we were developing that application, turns out that shared a wall with our training room. And we had a whole class of people there being trained. And after I finished singing, the trainer ended up coming into the conference room. He's like, was somebody just singing? And we're like, oh yeah, sorry. He's like, yeah, can you not do that anymore? You're interrupting the class. Sorry, Paulo, for that. Still in our training division. But yeah, the rest is history because it's funny. I did end up doing it on stage. It ended up being popular. It also just basically turned into a comedy hour because I found out real quick they couldn't see with any resolution, like the code that people were writing, stuff like that. So this build-a-thon, oh, there you go. Already in the comments, everybody. So now you can stop listening to me and go listen to my song. But yes, it ended up being that we thought that this build-a-thon concept was going to be a one and done thing. We were just going to do this thing to show off this perspective module, and then it'd be out there and we would never do a build-a-thon again. We do surveys after all of our conferences. Turns out the build-a-thon was listed as like the favorite session by everybody. And so it became the capstone event of the conference. And so we did it again in 2019 where Travis and Kevin did a rematch. 2020, we didn't have a conference. There was, I don't know, something going on in the world in 2020. I don't know what happened, but we didn't have a conference that year. 2021, we decided instead of having inductive automation employees go head to head, let's actually get our integrators who go and deploy projects with Ignition to go and build head to head to see who the best of the integrators are out there. And ever since, that's been what we've done. We've had an integrator competition both on. I'm still your host. We've expanded from me randomly singing on stage to now we have a IA band. We call it the IA Department of Funk. And we make a music video every year as part of the build-a-thon that we release. All those videos are out there as well. You can go find our music videos. Originally, we were doing more parodies of songs, like I had done that parody of the Ignition remix. Eventually, we decided, maybe we're playing it safe for legal reasons, and we decided to write our own music instead of doing parodies for people. And so the last 2 years have all been, maybe 3 years, the last 3 years have all been original songs. So eventually, if you all want to see an EP out from the IA Department of Funk, let us know in the comments, right? But yeah, it's funny because I had been at Inductive Automation for a while, but me deciding to sing on stage actually was great for my career in the sense that suddenly the owner of the company and the CEO and everybody knew who I was because, I was that guy who sang on stage. And also because it was boring, I took open Q&A. And so then I was just answering questions on stage from people and showing that I knew what I was talking about with the platform, right? And that was a risk that I took. But it ended up, did I get promoted because I sang on stage? No. But did it get me? Yes. Dave says yes. But yes. But I think that, what it did is it just made people aware of who I was. And I think that that's a big part of your career is taking risks so that people see you. And also, if you ever feel like your direct supervisor, your direct manager isn't showing off your work to the rest of the company, that's a red flag, right? Part of a good manager's role, I think, is to, highlight their employees, to show the good work that they're doing. And if there's a manager that's taking credit for all your work and doing all these things, watch out for that, right? But for me, ironically enough, it wasn't just good job performance. It was putting myself out there and then opportunities started opening up for me. So ICC is fun. We've actually just announced, we've been at the Harris Center, which is a performing arts center in Folsom, California, where our headquarters is every year. We just announced that this upcoming year, we're going to be moving to the convention center in downtown Sacramento. So we're going to have a lot more people. Just like Inductive Automation has grown, ICC has grown. Would love to have people come and check it out. Come to some after parties. We'll go drinking and I'll sing karaoke with you. I'm excited. But yeah, it's fun. We've had this conference where we've been able to work with employees, and it's been good for me to interact with our customers, whether it's singing or just talking to them about their projects and stuff like that. Inductive Automation has tried to stay really true to its roots of focusing on the community, and that conference has been a great way to do that.
I will
Absolutely,
if I can make a comment, Dave, I will say, Kent, I would definitely watch people develop, because I'm very curious to see how people do things. And it's definitely, I would say, not a minus, but a plus to have these types of events, right? It is awesome. And I think I will also say that probably Ignition is one of the only tools in the industry that lends itself well to this, because I can spin up, an instance today and be able to, again, using that window or resetting it, build something, right? And ultimately, I think in the traditional software space, you see that a lot with open source tools or tools that are meant for educational purposes that you can do that with. But in our space, it's simply not always feasible to create that kind of an environment. So I would say that we should be seeing more of that, and I hope that in the future it will open up more such events. Again, I think it's awesome. I think being able to see what engineers are building, being able to see them do it live is incredible in many ways. At least that is my perspective, and it seems like you're getting similar.
It's a popular perspective, because like I said, we keep doing surveys every year, and people keep saying, don't give up on the build-a-thon, keep the build-a-thon there. We need that every year. So it's a lot of work putting it together, and I got to give a huge shout out to our integrator community, because they do a ton of work, and then they come and they take some risk, right, of going on stage and building live. What if it goes horribly wrong? What does that mean for the reputation of the integrator? But they take those risks, and I think every integrator that's competed has been super happy with the publicity they've received and the reaction from customers, right? People love that they go and show off their chops, and kind of gamifies, industrial automation development. We always joke about it being, the premier event in the world of competitive SCADA. But it's fun. But I do think you're right. People want to see that there's no smoke and mirrors. They want to see you build something, and there's value in watching that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Kent, one follow-up ICC question that I know has been burning for everyone. Will the Department of Funk make it to Sacramento next year?
I am going on a tour of the conference center next week, trying to figure out what our stage is going to be. So if I have my say, yes, you'll see the IA Department of Funk. We've always performed in our headquarters parking lot. We may begin to step up this year. We'll see. But stay tuned. But yes, if I have my way, you'll be.
I'm picturing center of the conference room in like a spinning circular stage. And you guys will just play all day for 3 days straight. And hopefully you'll have enough voice left at the end of day 3 to go announce the build-a-thon, Kent.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Kent, this has been amazing. Vlad and I probably have like 4,000 more questions to ask you, but we do want to be respectful of everyone's time, especially the listeners. So we'll go and finish with the last questions we ask everyone. First question, as everyone knows, I like to have fun with, is Kent, what does the future of the industry? What does the future of Ignition? Or maybe we don't want to ask you that specific one, because that might get you in trouble with people who now absolutely know your name and your face and your singing voice. But what does the future of the industry look like in the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah. Well, since I talked about, I kind of started in IT and then found my way to OT, I'll mention one thing related to that convergence. OT is very selective of which aspects of IT they're willing to embrace and willing to adopt. And mostly, I think that's because in the industrial space, uptime is king, right? I don't want to come and bring in something that is going to be replaced frequently or could need to be restarted often. Like, I just need it to be rock solid and reliable. But at the same time, so many people are developing directly in production. And there's this like, like what is happening? Like we say we need everything to be rock solid, and yet everybody just goes and opens the designer and starts changing things willy-nilly, right? And so I think in the very near future, you're going to start seeing people implement true deployment best practices in the industrial space, where they have a dev environment, a test environment, and a production environment. And I think that the reason why is because you're seeing the adoption of containerization. You're seeing, different licensing models to support this. You're seeing the adoption of the cloud, all these kind of things. But people are finding that before they thought that they had to go to the cloud to do these things, or they had to spend a bunch of money, or they had to do these things. And Inductive Automation and other vendors are starting to say, no, like this is in your best interest, and we want to incentivize you to do this. I know with our new release 8.3, we're introducing a bunch of new features that make Ignition more compatible with Git for version control and how deploy modes and stuff like that. And so I really think that is one IT thing that is going to finally officially make it into the mainstream of OT. Not trying to say that nobody in OT is doing this. There are people, but I think it's going to become mainstream as people realize if uptime really is king, you've got to be careful with how you do development.
I'll be honest with you, Kent. I'm not worried about Ignition making those changes. I'm more worried about other vendors on which Ignition usually depends on for their tools to be developed to go in that direction. But we'll see. I think it's definitely going in that direction, but I think it will take longer than even 5 years to truly change. Again, like being in the field, I can see that a lot of how would I put it? Well, I guess like OT software development is not how would I say, it does not have those features enabled yet, and it's gonna take a lot of changes to make that happen, I think.
Well, part of my job as a sales engineer and in my sales engineering division is to help our application engineering team build tools that show people how it's possible, right? And so our application engineering team right now, we have that public demo project. We are in the process of completely building that based on containerization, where it's all managed with Git, where we're doing these things. And we're going to document every piece of that and give that to people so that they've got a clear vision and roadmap of exactly how it could be achieved for them. And does that mean everybody will adopt it, Vlad? No, I think you're right. It's an uphill battle, but we're going to do everything in our power to make it feasible for people by doing the work ourselves first, giving them working things, because I think there's value, right? There's some big trends that it's like, okay, yeah, that's cool, but the value, I'm not sure I see that, right? It's like AI, cool. What's the direct value right now? What am I getting out of it, right? But with deployment modes, increasing uptime, that I see value. I can apply real dollars and cents to that right now, right? And if people understand that, I think the motivation is there. And if the motivation is there, people find a way.
Oh yeah, I guess like what I meant, just to be clear, right? I think that you guys will definitely succeed. I just meant, tools for, let's say, like PLCs and HMIs and kind of like some other like hardware. There's just not enough, I guess, tools to make that possible. And ultimately, Ignition pulls from a lot of those devices. So people building sometimes the tools at those lower levels that feed into SCADA don't have that same understanding, right? So that's where there might be that clash. But yeah, I think you guys will definitely explain it really well, and it makes a lot of sense. Again, I'm sold on that idea, but like I said, the other vendors are not up to speed. Let's put it this way.
We'll drag them along, kicking and screaming. But yes, it's going to be rough for people to do some monolithic rollout of everything through this. You're right. It's going to have to be, I manage software in one way, I manage hardware in another way. I do these things, which is unfortunate, but it'll be the reality. People live in it first.
And I would say that just in the last 5 years, I've certainly seen significant changes and trends in that direction. And I think it's only getting better and easier as there are more tools and more of that comes mainstream. I think a large percentage of it is more of a change management. And I think a large percentage of it is very much having some of the legacy groups retire or go away from those management and decision maker roles and allowing other people who are perhaps more IT or tech savvy to go take those roles and say, hey, why are we not using these tools from IT that we've been using for 20 plus years? What can we do? And from my perspective, the groups, the end users that work on Ignition are much more towards that IT savvy as opposed to we'll go build this one monolithic solution that we've got for 20 years. It would be difficult to go have an instance of Ignition that hasn't been changed for 20 years. In fact, it'd be difficult to go have a Ignition instance that hasn't been changed for more than 10 at this point. Ken, that was amazing. Let me ask for some career advice. I know we've talked a ton of absolutely fantastic things. You've given a bunch of advice. I especially like the go take a chance and have everyone know your name. I do want to reiterate, it doesn't have to go be singing in front of, I don't know, 1,000 people who maybe have never heard you sing before. But if you had one other piece of career advice to give, what would that be for the listeners?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of talk these days of it's you against the company. And if you want to come out on top, you have to change jobs frequently. That's the only way you're going to get pay increases. That's the only way you're going to, do all these things. And for people to respect you because the company doesn't care about you, right? And my advice is, if that's the kind of companies you keep working for, then yeah, that's probably true. But I've found with my career that it's better to hitch your wagon to a good company that you believe in rather than to just say, I'm looking for the next job every time, right? Go find a career by finding a company you care about. And it's worked for me, right? I've been able to move up. I've been able to become a director now. And I have no plans of leaving Inductive Automation, right? It's been great for me. Is everybody going to have the exact same experience as me? No, but I think if you find the right company, your experience can be good. So don't be afraid to stick around someplace is my advice.
I think that's great advice. Absolutely optimizing on the people you have to work with 10-ish hours every day for a whole bunch of years over optimizing on a title or on money to some extent. Absolutely is good. I would agree with that, Kent. I've left bosses and companies because they didn't fit in what I was looking for in the past. And I think lots of people have had similar stories. It's really hard to go find a good company. Very infrequently do you hear someone say, I love the company I'm working for. It allows me to do all of these things. I make enough money to be able to do the things I want to do, but I've decided to leave because someone is going to go pay me 10 extra percent down the street, and it's just a crapshoot. Let's go start over and see what this new place is because this place was already so good. So I think that is a fantastic piece of advice. Next question: you are actually the last book recommendation that we are going to ask for guests this year, and I know that you have at least one book coming out soon. So what are the book recommendations you have? Can you give us a pitch for the book releasing? What'd you say, Friday?
Yeah, well, I'm a big Brandon Sanderson fan, high fantasy type stuff. So if you are looking to get into reading and you just want a really good author that's got a ton of books out there, check out Brandon Sanderson. But his best series, in my opinion, is the Stormlight Archive. And book 5 of the Stormlight Archive comes out this Friday, called Wind and Truth. Sorry to everybody I work with if I seem distracted on Friday. Now you know why, but yeah, I would say that if I was going to pick a fun book, that's the book I would recommend. Go check out Wind and Truth this Friday. But in a more,
if I can ask you, Kent, on that side,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Do you listen to that as an audiobook or do you read the actual physical copy?
I used to read all the time. I've got kids now. I'm busy. And audiobooks just end up being much more conducive to my lifestyle. And so I am doing an audiobook. I love Libby. Shout out to the Libby app where you can download stuff from websites. But this is a new one. I'm getting on Audible, but yeah, this one will be an audiobook.
62 hours and 48
It's long. This is epic fantasy. Wow. But it's not a quick read, but it's an easy read. He pulls you in and you don't want to put it down. So it may be 62 hours. I wouldn't be surprised if I finish it this weekend. So stay tuned.
Someone who's not familiar with the author, can they just pick up book 5, or do you recommend starting with the first?
No, I recommend starting either with book 1 of the Stormlight Archive, called The Way of Kings, or you can start with, he's got some other great series like Mistborn, or if you want a standalone novel, Tress and the Emerald Sea is a great entry book into Brandon Sanderson. But you can go on Reddit, say, what book should I read by Brandon Sanderson? There is a whole community that will be happy to enlighten you. I'm not the only fan out there. But in fact, he does his own conference. He's got a conference called Dragonsteel that I think kicks off today or tomorrow. He's a great author. I highly recommend his stuff.
Interesting. I'll get the book 1. 4.873 thousand ratings. That is
wow.
That is
so for everyone on the internet, we've lost Vlad for the next week. Hopefully he comes up in enough time to do Manufacturing Hub with me same time next week, as he's going to listen to, I don't know, 400 hours of Brandon Sanderson between here and now. But Kent, you also have another less fantasy, more specific, interesting business book for us today. Yeah,
this book was actually recommended to me by our director of HR at Inductive Automation, Mitzi. And I love Mitzi because she started as an employee development manager. So she was focused on building people. And now she leads our HR team and is still focused on building people. And I love that. That's probably one of the reasons I love Inductive Automation, because it's still very focused on building people. But the Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, it goes through and it talks about the secrets of, the subtitle is The Secrets of Highly Successful Groups. And it talks about different companies and groups that have been able to grow and do great things. And it talks about how did they define a culture that led to that? And I think that ties into the career advice I gave of go find a good company. You need to go find a good culture fit and find a culture that's of growth and of positivity and of excellence and all these things, right? And I think that the Culture Code shows you what to look for. It shows you, some great examples of highly successful cultures. So yeah, that's my other.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you for that. And then the last question for you, Kent, is how can our listeners help? Who should reach out? Who should connect with you? Are you looking to hire sales engineers or any of the now seemingly 24 different groups that you're managing? Are you guys looking for new customers? How can our listeners help you?
Yeah. Well, obviously you should come and apply to Inductive Automation. Inductive Automation is a great company. Like I said, you want to hitch your wagon to the right company. It's certainly been the right company for me. So we'd welcome all people. We do post all of our listings on our website. You can check it out. I'm happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. Would love to get to know you and your career. And certainly within my team, as we look at 2025, we're going to have some positions opening up in sales engineering and application engineering and so on. And so, if you want to come be a part of that kind of a team, please get in touch. But I would also say, I really do believe in our product. I believe in Ignition, or else it's not, the company isn't enough. I need to believe in, what our company is doing. And so go download Ignition, give it a try, and be like me. We didn't even get to talk about home automation systems. I know you guys talked to Travis in the past about home automation systems, but there's a free version of Ignition people can download and use at home. We call it our Maker Edition. Go tinker, go have fun. But yeah, for me, mostly it's just fun talking to you guys. And, I appreciate all the stuff that you guys talk about with the industry and the thought leadership you have there and the thought leaders that you bring onto your platform here, and for continuing to talk to people from Inductive Automation, because I think it's doing a good service to your listeners, because I'm extremely biased, but I think Ignition solves a lot of problems. So I hope people go and give it a shot.
Absolutely, Kent. Thank you so much. Vlad always loves it when I throw out episode ideas at the end of things, just live on the internet. I think it would be super fun. I know you're into home automation. I know Travis is insanely into home automation. I've watched him open and close his garage from an ignition perspective application, like halfway across the country. I know there are a bunch of other IA folks who are into it. I think that the next time we all get together, we should have some sort of home automation shootout where everyone gets to go show us all of the insane home automation that they have put together. And I'm just going to sit back in awe of it mostly. I have very little to add to that conversation, Kent, but I think it is absolutely awesome and amazing. I think that that would be a lot of fun. But no, Kent, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone, thank you for hanging out with us. We had a bunch of awesome comments in here. Hank was talking, I don't know if you saw, Kent, but Hank was talking about how he just talked to a customer earlier today or this week about Ignition and Sepasoft, and they were super excited. So thank you, everyone, for that. If you haven't made it this far, make sure that you are connected and following Kent. Make sure you're connected and following Inductive Automation, as well as Manufacturing Hub, as well as Vlad and myself. But if you guys are watching at this point, the odds of being connected with us or soon to be connected with us is exceptionally high. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button if you want the notifications for the weekly episodes. And if you made it this far on podcast form, you are awesome. You may be like Kent and his super active life doing all of these other things. Go rate us 5 stars, go share us. When I remember to go tell people this, Kent, Vlad remembers to go publish the episodes on Thursday morning, and more people listen. It's just